in his case, he was talking about weight. You know, you have to wait. W-A-I-T, wait. You have to wait. The Negro has to wait. You know, but I think some of that weight has been complemented, not necessarily replaced, but some of that weight has been complemented by whataboutism. So if there's a direct address for a certain group that needs this attention, that will actually be for the collective of us all, for our betterment, there's a weight and a whataboutism that is now complemented. There's what about this other group and what about that other group, and that there's no disregard for anyone, but there has been a willful ignoring of the people he's speaking about in everything that I sent you that were at the core of his motivations.
You begin to renounce parts of your authentic self with hopes of remaining the representation of the Black male in a white dominant environment. In my study of researching this, I've had participants do my research share things like they were asked to cut their braids off. They were asked to get rid of their beard. They were asked to do things that was taking them away from who they were. And I participated in that whole process of making sure I look a certain way when I go to different spaces. And although I was there in whatever attire I was in, however I was looking, I felt like I was losing pieces of myself. And what ends up happening is you fight against these unfair rules that hurt Black people and can make it hard to be brave enough to dream big, hard to resist the temptation, because they tell you that if you do this, then this is what's going to happen, right? If you perform this way, then we can move you up faster. You know, don't ask this question, don't make this loud noise. This is part of the great American game of Black men, particularly. And one thing I want to just pause and make sure I'm clear about, although I'm talking about Black males, this applies to Black people, period. So I'm just using Black males because that's my particular research.
A constitution, we think of it as a writing. Usually we think of it as having two parts. One that kind of is a formal description of the structure of the government, and another which establishes certain rights that the people have. And as I just said, and I think is apparent from modern news headlines, the fact that something is in writing doesn't make it so. And by the same token, the fact that something is not in writing doesn't mean that it's not part of the Constitution. I mean, the English famously have an unwritten Constitution, and a very important element of which is the Magna Carta. It started established in 1215, and it has become part of the English Constitution, which was then adopted in the American colonies through the English common law. And the meaning of the Magna Carta, as we think of it, is that the king is not above the law, and that people who have been detained by the king or arrested have the right to appear before a judge and challenge the king's right to hold them. So those principles are there in the law, but if you go back and look at the Magna Carta, those rights only applied to a handful of barons. Okay, they didn't apply to ordinary Englishmen.
Start small and then I'll go big. So I'll start with everyday things you can do right now or when you go home. First things first, make sure that you have a filter on your faucets. If you have any type of autoimmune anything, right, make sure you have a filter on your shower as well. So making sure that the water you're consuming at home is filtered. And the caveat to that is that most of the plastic filters are in fact plastic, right? But there are some brands that you can get that are still under 30 or 40. And then most of the time, if you check certain places or like Amazon or what have you, you can typically find them on sale for under 30. Plastic plates and cups, use them sparingly. I understand you have a little get together, what have you, use them for that. But every day, make sure that you're not heating things up in plastic. So that means Tupperware as well. We're using less plastic. So those are some of the everyday things. Also, if you all see, Felton knows I have water bottles. I would suggest you don't need name brand. You can find, I get water bottles really inexpensively at places like Ollie's. Which are really marked down. You can get a nice 16-ounce reusable like this for $7, $8, under $10. But what I suggest is that if you like to take water, and I'm one who has to have something to drink, reusable, okay? And also it helps too because it's insulated. It'll keep it cool, but make sure that you're not just taking bottles.
I accept that I'm going to spend the rest of my life working for the beloved community. The leadership program that I started embodies the teachings of Christ and Dr. King's vision of America as a more perfect union. For me, again, going back to that little girl in Newark, New Jersey, and why I wrote Where I Come From. Growing up, the word slave to me was just a word. It didn't really have any real meaning or attachment to my person. They were just an entity in time, and I didn't really have any knowledge or understanding of their lives or what they experienced. But then one day in January of 1977, Roots, Alex Haley's epic saga about an American family aired on television. And for the first time, I understood.
I'm going to get to the big question first because I think it's the one that is the topic. Where's God? Race and religion. The question is, does the church, in whatever way that needs to be understood, but we understand that Christianity is at the core of this, does the church owe an apology to Black Americans in the present since the most recent history that we can capture and understand that all that is birthed from? Do they owe an apology to, in some ways, capitulate?
Yes, and when harm has been done, we apologize for it. But that's just where we started from. We just talk as a white male. When harm has been done, we apologize.
So extremely excited about that for him. I am a child who grew up in East Greensboro. I grew up in poverty. That is actually like I was the newspaper poster child for poverty. That's me being held by my preschool teacher. And beside my face is the words poverty. That is how I grew up. And it kind of really hones in on why I do what I do and why I have such a passion for this work. And I'm a champion for children. I have worked in advocacy for quite some time, advocating for the needs of children and families. And so I enjoy that immensely. I have so much fun. I'll speak at Board of Education meetings or county commissioner meetings or at the state. I will speak wherever my voice is needed. And there have been some changes based off of some of the advocacy work that I have done with in partnership with other organizations. Now, Shift Ed is an organization. We are a backbone agency, and we boldly accelerate student potential, and we do that through tools and resources that are provided to. I would say this: we are education to career backbone agency. So we support students as they enter kindergarten. And a little bit before, but as they enter kindergarten, all the way through their career.
Topic that we've talked about multiple times in multiple ways in this space, and it's primarily because it's so important. It is a critical time in our history, our collective history.
Reconstruction there was different, and how? And when I talk about Reconstruction, I really try to focus on a couple of elements to define it. One is thinking about Reconstruction is in part an effort to put a society back together that's been torn apart by something like, we'll say, a civil war. I mean, that's really what we're focusing on here. But at kind of a next level of detail, it also talks about some of those social changes that take place in the wake of the society coming back together, because it doesn't exactly come back together in the way that it started. That is, they don't revert back to some old behaviors and customs always. So what changed? And that's one of the questions we get to. But I also want to talk about Reconstruction as being a phenomenon after 1876. This is when we tend to think of the era ending. But by looking at 1876 in some locales, we can see some of the political aspects, particularly the competition between state and federal governments. And these are continuing in some places, where others it seems like it's fairly ended. And thus, it's kind of a limited continuation of Reconstruction. I'm geographically focusing on one state. I'm only looking at Florida, and to whatever extent I look outside of Florida for the purpose of today's talk, I'll let you know that. But for the most part, I'm talking about Florida, Floridians,